Thank you all so much for being here tonight to help us celebrate the launch of the Pledge for Equal Opportunity for Women in Arbitration. For those who don't know me, I'm Sylvia Norrie. I'm a partner in the arbitration team here in Freshfields, and together with Jackie, where is she? Jackie, who needs no introduction, we're going to say a few words tonight about the Pledge. Now, the campaign for better gender diversity in arbitration is not a new one. There are people in this room who've been campaigning on this front for some 2 decades, probably when I was still at school. So I feel somewhat of an imposter here tonight. But the truth is, even if I've joined the movement a little late, I've joined it now because I've seen what we have all seen. And that is, no matter how many women rise up through the ranks, the number appointed as arbitrators remains woefully inadequate. Today, according to GAR, women make up 20% of partners in the dispute resolution departments of law firms globally. Women also make up 20% of High Court judges and Court of Appeal judges in England. And in the US and the Netherlands, the statistics are even higher. So some 30% or 40% of High Court judges in the US and the Netherlands are women. Statistics of sitting arbitrators are harder to come by, and we've done our best. Thanks to Lucy Greenwood in large part, actually, who's been researching this for many years. But those statistics that we have from the arbitral institutions tell us that women make up, at most, some 10% of sitting arbitrators. We've got some of the stats up on the screen, and I'll say it's been hard to put them together because some institutions measure the percentage of arbitrators who are women, and some measure sitting arbitrators, and they're actually very different. But by our best guess, it's less than 10% of arbitrators today are women, and the statistics are actually worse when the arbitrators are appointed by the parties than when they're appointed by the institutions. These statistics are simply unacceptable. The problem in the world of arbitration is, unlike at the bench, we have no regulator who can in any way supervise the appointments to our tribunals. So it's up to us, the arbitral community, to police the system and ensure that it works both properly and fairly. Some of you will have been here today at the conference and seen the session that we had on demystifying the arbitral selection process. And it's far from a transparent process. Often recommendations are made by word of mouth. They're made in favour of people who have certain experience and people who have a certain reputation and a certain stature. And that really tends to perpetuate a vicious circle. Often the usual suspects, and to quote the Americans, the pale, male, and stale, with apologies to those of you in the room who fulfill that description, but these, looking at no one in particular, these are the criteria that spring to mind in these cases. And I know this because I've been guilty myself of compiling lists which, to my shame, looking back at them, were almost exclusively male. We shouldn't underestimate the problem of unconscious bias in this process. The naysayers will tell us that we should blame the pipeline for the lack of female arbitrators, or they'll say that it will fix itself in a few years as women rise up through the ranks. But despite the fact that there are more women right now at the top of the profession than ever before, there is still not a fair representation of women on arbitral tribunals. And why is that? Well, part of the reason is that a preconceived image exists of the model arbitrator, the aforementioned usual suspects, and often counsel assume that that's what the client wants. Well, guess what? Our clients are telling us that that is not the case. Just ask Jo Cross from BP, who is somewhere in the room today and was on one of our panels, but there are countless other clients who tell us that really that's not the criteria. The arbitration community, like many tight-knit groups, likes to gather together and collectively navel-gaze. At conference after conference, we bemoan the failings in our system, including in our tribunals. We talk about lack of availability, lack of preparation, delays in awards, entrenched views, lack of legitimacy. While, of course, diversity of arbitrators is not a panacea, it certainly provides a response to some of these complaints. There is no question that a pool of very qualified women exists to provide the additional resource required to meet these concerns. Merits and diversity simply are not in competition. The objective today is equal opportunity for equally qualified women, and this will benefit the entire arbitration community and not just the ladies. Until we draw on the pool of quality that exists among our top women, we are in fact diluting the excellence of our arbitral system. And as importantly, equality is simply the right thing to do. particularly in our profession. And I'll admit that I tried to secure tonight as a speaker Lady Hale, our sole judge on the Supreme Court. She is someone who has a lot to say about this subject, but since she can't be here tonight, I'll simply steal her lines. We owe it not just to women, but to the future of the law and the legal system to step up to the plate. Which brings me to the pledge. The pledge is a call to action in the arbitration community. Now, many voices, as I mentioned previously, have argued for this cause over the years. And some of them are here tonight, so I won't name them all, but just to call out three: Merez Philippe of Arbitral Women and the ICC, Jackie, obviously, at the LCIA, Annette Magnuson, who I believe is here tonight from the SEC, and countless others who have put their name to this cause for many, many years before I jumped on the bandwagon. But recently, the momentum in the fight for gender diversity has grown beyond a core group. The number of women at the helm of our arbitral institutions has obviously helped, but that's not the only reason. The time is right for change. 2 years ago at ICA in Miami, Jackie tabled the idea of a pledge for gender diversity in arbitration. And that idea was as good as it was timely. All that was needed was some impetus and global coordination to adopt the pledge and go on to move the dial. And so we organised a dinner here in London. And we invited a cross-section of the arbitration community: institutions, arbitrators, corporates, counsel. Because we recognised and continue to recognise that to move the dial, every stakeholder in the arbitration world needs to play their part. And while this was actually the first arbitral dinner that I've ever attended that had more women than men, the men played their role and continue to play their role as a critical part of this initiative. So after London, further dinners followed. We had dinners in New York, in Berlin, in Hong Kong, Dubai, Singapore, Paris, Geneva, Rome, Vienna, and Amsterdam.
Where was the food best?
A global steering committee was set up, and the worldwide support has really been tremendous. It's an immense pleasure to see so many of those people who participated in those dinners here tonight. So I hope by now you've all had the opportunity to read the pledge. A copy is just over there, alongside a table where you can all sign up. There's also a website which contains further details. And that contains, for example, the list of the steering committee and a list of the individuals and the organisations who have already signed up pre-launch. And I'm very proud to say that we have over 300 signatories even before tonight, which is the launch, including over 30 organisations, which includes arbitral institutions, it includes law firms, it includes chambers, law faculties, corporates, and of course arbitral women. The pledge has a simple objective, and that's to improve the profile of women in arbitration with a view to securing the appointment of more women on arbitral tribunals on an equal opportunity basis. And there was a question in the conference earlier about whether what we're seeking to do is to impose targets or try to impose some kind of 50-50 rule. And of course, that is not the case. That is not the objective. The objective is simply equal opportunity and a fair representation of women on an equal opportunity basis, equally qualified candidates on tribunals. The text of the pledge is the result of a collaborative effort of all those who attended the dinners, and in particular the steering committee, which I am proud to chair along with Wendy Miles, who I can't see right now, but hello Wendy, co-chairs our steering committee. And the pledge seeks to establish concrete and actionable steps that the arbitration community can and must take to ensure that fairer representation of women. Now, I'm sure we all have anecdotes of appalling gender diversity from our careers, particularly the women. The countless all-male tribunals, the lone female voices on committees and at conferences. My own test has been the marked absence of any queue for the ladies at all of the arbitration hearings that I have attended. And I think arbitration hearings are the only place in the world where the queue is always outside the gents. So we'd like this to become a thing of the past. We aspire for lists of arbitrators routinely to include a significant proportion of women, for all-male tribunals to become the exception, for an all-female tribunal not to be an aberration, for it to be the norm to see 50% of female speakers, as we managed to achieve today at our conference, and to rejoice in queuing for the ladies at an arbitration hearing. So on that note, I'll hand over to Jackie to give her perspective from the LCIA.
Thank you, Sylvia, and thank you for making this
bizarre, random notion that I had 2 years ago real, because really the thought was simple and making it work was not. The work that has been put into this effort by Sylvia, the team here at Freshfields, and the group, the wider group, the steering committee, etc., is massive. And I think we really owe you big time. Thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can pay you back, because I think this is the beginning. Let me go back to the pledge initially. What my point was at the time when I spoke at Miami, and by then I was blissfully ignorant of what institutions really do, but it did strike me that it was a little bit unfair to think that institutions could deal with this issue by themselves. And I said at the time, and still strongly believe, this is something that we all as stakeholders should put our shoulders under. I think all of us involved in the process, arbitrators, counsel, parties, institutions, everybody has a role. And there are many similarities in what we can do, but there are also different things we can do. Where there is, for instance, a specific role for the institutions is to give data which are not readily available to others. So the LCIA has been, as I discovered at the time, been publishing data for quite some time, and it's great to see that some other institutions have recently also stepped up efforts to provide these data, because without facts you cannot have an informed discussion. Other efforts, I think, are issues that everybody can do and can play a role in, and that's the beauty of the pledge. When we discussed this, at the beginning there was a thinking, well, you know, I'm just a party and I just know a few arbitrators and I will just be able to nominate a guy because they're just more well-known arbitrators who are male and that should be it, and then the institution will appoint the gal. Well, that's not how it works. If nothing else, for the reason that you look at institutions to appoint the very best arbitrators, not the weaker arbitrators. So arbitration institutions know some of the facts and perhaps know more people simply because we are involved in more nominations, more appointments. But each and every one of us should ask themselves at every decision that we make, whether it is a list internally provided to team members, whether it is a list that is sent to the client, whether it is a list that an institution sends to the parties, have we thought about gender as an issue? And it may be that there are no qualified women, and then the list will not contain any women. That is perfectly possible. Quality should not be compromised by any of these efforts. It is about the thinking about it. The other thing is what institutions can do, what we all can do. It is not only about the actual appointments, and you illustrated that today. It is about just making sure when you have a table with people behind it that there's a bit of diversity, that there are some women and that there are some men, and sometimes there will be more men and sometimes there will be more women. For me, in a way, the turning point of the significance came when I was sitting actually in an LCA arbitration as arbitrator, where the solicitor, the leading solicitor was a woman, barrister was a woman, the CFO was a woman, and at least I was on the panel, and it struck me that it would have been really weird in that scenario had there not been a woman on the tribunal. So I think it is awareness. It is awareness that the pool is definitely now big enough to do better than what we're doing. We heard about the 20%. That's still a long way from the 50%, which is, I think, the natural goal that we should strive for, but that is going to take time. I would like to end on a not pessimistic note, but make a few comments about what we should be thinking about as well. We're here today to talk about gender diversity. I have referred to that in a way as low-hanging fruit. Not even that low-hanging, but low-hanging fruit. We should not think about gender diversity in isolation. Diversity is diverse. Sometimes that can actually work in our favor. We recently did an event, actually 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago in Africa, where I looked at the faculty, as the Americans say, and I realized that the majority of the speakers were female and came from Africa, and that had gone kind of hand in hand. There are jurisdictions where it's actually not so difficult to find women. There are other jurisdictions where it is even more difficult than in our jurisdiction here to find women. It's an example of how different considerations play a role. Nationalities, cultural background, religion, age, all of these considerations play a role. So I think perhaps we should strive for being back here in a year or two and think about the further, the amendments to the pledge or the additions to the pledge and what else we should take into consideration. I think it's going to do us all good. Thank you, Sylvia.
I'm not going to make another speech in case you were worried, but just a few housekeeping points, and that really is to say, obviously there are lots of cocktails to be drunk. The signature is over there, so please sign up if you haven't done already as you leave. More importantly, there are giveaways to pick up from the table on your way out. These are perhaps a little more tailored towards the women in the room than the men, but they are thanks to the generous sponsorship and creative minds of certain ladies who are in the room, I believe, at Allen & Overy, Boyce Schiller, Homburger, Lalive, Schellenberg Whitmer, and Weil Gottschall. And alongside them on the table, we've got some postcards which, or maybe they're on that table, over there, some postcards which set out the pledge and also have the website link that you can peruse at your leisure. That's all that's left for me to say other than to give tremendous thanks, not just to all of you for being here and supporting the pledge, but in particular the team on the ground today who have been absolutely amazing. In particular, the chief person on the team, Ashley, who has tonsillitis and has still made it to be with us tonight. So Ashley, Romilly, Olivia, Steph, Lauren, Debbie, Liz, Emma and Dean, thank you hugely for all the efforts tonight and enjoy your drinks.